Prepare to chuckle and grin as we embark on a journey to give some age-old sayings a hilarious makeover. In a world where laughter is often the best medicine, these revamped adages are sure to tickle your funny bone and leave you in stitches. So, buckle up and get ready for a side-splitting ride through the wacky world of revamped wisdom. A bad workman blames his tools. But a good workman blames his coworker who borrowed his tools and never returned them. A bit much, said the person who ordered the family-size pizza for themselves and proceeded to eat the whole thing. A blessing in disguise. Especially when that disguise is a really terrible haircut that forces you to finally embrace the bald look. A bolt from the blue. Or as I like to call it, nature's way of reminding us that umbrellas are just portable lightning rods. A chip on one's shoulder. Probably leftover from the bag of chips they couldn't finish last night. A clean slate, which lasts approximately 5 minutes after your toddler discovers the joy of crayons. A diamond in the rough. But let's be honest, sometimes it's just a cubic zirconia pretending to be something it's not. A dime a dozen. Especially during those clearance sales where you can buy a dozen for a dime and regret it later. A dog is a man's best friend. Until you try to take away their favorite chew toy and suddenly you're on their naughty list. A drop in the bucket, said the person trying to bail out their sinking canoe with a thimble. A fly in the ointment. Or as I like to call it, nature's way of keeping us humble during outdoor picnics. A fresh pair of eyes. Which is just a polite way of saying, can you take a look at this mess I made and tell me where I went wrong? A friend in need is a friend indeed. Unless they're asking for help moving on the hottest day of summer, then maybe it's time to reconsider the friendship. A game of cat and mouse, where the mouse wins by default because the cat gets distracted by a sunbeam. A golden opportunity, which usually turns out to be fool's gold, but hey, at least it's shiny. A hard pill to swallow, especially when it's the reality check pill that leaves a bitter taste in your mouth. A horse of a different color. But let's be honest, all horses are just various shades of brown with fancy names. A house divided against itself cannot stand. Unless it's a duplex, then it's just a really awkward living situation. A labor of love, which usually involves a lot of sweat, tears, and accidentally gluing your fingers together while attempting DIY projects. A leopard cannot change its spots, but it can try a new wardrobe and hope for the best. A little bird told me. And that little bird was promptly shushed because it couldn't keep a secret to save its life. A little knowledge is a dangerous thing. Especially when it's just enough knowledge to be annoying at trivia night but not enough to actually win. A necessary evil. Like traffic lights. Sure, they're annoying, but imagine the chaos without them. A penny saved is a penny earned. And a dollar saved is a coffee from that fancy cafe you've been eyeing all week. A picture is worth 1,000 words. But a selfie is worth at least 100 filters and strategic angles. A piece of cake, said the person who's never tried to bake a cake from scratch and ended up with something resembling a rubber tire. A red herring, which is just a fancy way of saying, look over there, while I sneak the last slice of pizza. A rising tide lifts all boats. Except for the one with the leaky hull, which sinks faster than you can say, abandoned ship. A rolling stone gathers no moss. But it does gather a lot of momentum and a few dents along the way. A sight for sore eyes. Especially when it's the delivery person finally arriving with your long-awaited package. A skeleton in the closet, which usually turns out to be more embarrassing than scary. A stitch in time saves 9. But 10 stitches later, you're wondering if maybe you should have just hired a professional. A taste of one's own medicine, said the chef who accidentally seasoned the soup with salt instead of sugar. A thin line between love and hate, which explains why romance novels and horror movies are sometimes oddly similar. A tiger cannot change its stripes, but it can change its diet to avoid those pesky zebra stripes. A watched pot never boils. Unless you leave the room for a second and suddenly the kitchen is a scene from a disaster movie. A wolf in sheep's clothing. Or as we call it in the office, Monday mornings disguised as Fridays. Absence makes the heart grow fonder. Especially when it's a break from your overly enthusiastic coworker's daily coffee breath. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. And absolute power over the TV remote leads to endless arguments over what to watch. Accidents will happen. Especially when you try to reenact action scenes from your favorite movies in your living room. Actions speak louder than words. Except when those actions involve trying to sneakily eat snacks during a Zoom meeting. Add fuel to the fire. Literally, if you're the one in charge of the barbecue. Add insult to injury. Like accidentally bumping into someone and then apologizing profusely, only to spill coffee on them in the process. Advantage of. Which usually involves taking advantage of the office printer to make personal copies of cat memes. Afraid of one's own shadow. Especially when you're trying to sneak up on someone and end up scaring yourself instead. After all is said and done. And after you've said and done everything, you realize you forgot to hit send on that important email. After the fact. Which is just another way of saying, oops, I probably should have thought about that before. Against all odds. Like trying to find a matching pair of socks in the laundry basket. Against the clock. And against all logic, you're somehow expected to finish the project in half the time it actually requires. Against the grain. Especially when the grain is trying to convince you to eat kale instead of pizza. Against the tide. Which is just another day at the beach when you're determined to build the world's most epic sandcastle. Age before beauty. Unless you're trying to get the last piece of cake, then it's every person for themselves. Ahead of one's time. And usually ahead of the rest of the group waiting for you to finish getting ready. Ahead of the curve. Unless you're talking about my dance moves, which are firmly stuck in the early 2000s. Ain't no rest for the wicked. Especially when your cat decides that 3 a.m. is the perfect time for a midnight snack and a rendition of the Meow Mix jingle. Ain't that a kick in the head? Or as I like to call it, Monday mornings in a nutshell. Ain't the sharpest tool in the shed. But sometimes it's the wobbliest, most unreliable tool that gets the job done in the end. Air one's dirty laundry. Which is just a polite way of saying, let's gossip about Karen from accounting. Airing one's grievances. Because nothing brings people together like complaining about the office coffee machine. Airing one's views. And then promptly getting into a heated debate with your Uncle Bob at Thanksgiving dinner. Alive and kicking. Unless it's Monday morning and you haven't had your coffee yet. All aboard. But if you're late, the train won't wait. Just ask the guy sprinting after it in the movies. All bark and no bite. Like that tiny chihuahua who thinks it's a ferocious guard dog but runs away at the sight of a squirrel. All ears. Especially when there's juicy gossip involved, then suddenly everyone's ears are bigger than Dumbo's. All for one and one for all. Unless it's the last slice of pizza, then it's every person for themselves. All hands on deck. Except for Carl, who conveniently disappeared when it was time to clean the office fridge. All in a day's work. Which usually involves a lot more coffee and a lot less productivity than you'd like. All in good time. Said the procrastinator, 5 minutes before the deadline. All in the family. And all at each other's throats during Thanksgiving dinner. All of a sudden. Like when you remember you had homework due tomorrow, and it's already 11 p.m. All or nothing. Said the person trying to decide between getting out of bed or hitting snooze for the 5th time. All talk and no action. Like when your friend promises to start a workout routine but spends more time talking about it than actually doing it. All that glitters is not gold. Sometimes it's just glitter, and you'll be finding it in your hair for weeks. All the king's horses and all the king's men. Couldn't put Humpty Dumpty together again because they were too busy taking selfies with the shattered egg. All things come to those who wait. But apparently, patience doesn't come with express shipping. All thumbs. Especially when you're trying to type a message on your phone with gloves on in the middle of winter. All too often. Like when you're trying to enjoy a quiet evening and your neighbor decides it's the perfect time for a karaoke marathon. All work and no play makes Jack a dull boy. But all play and no work makes Jack unemployed and living in his parents' basement. All's fair in love and war. And apparently in competitive board games, according to your overly competitive cousin at family game night. All's well that ends well, said the cat after it finally caught the mouse and promptly fell asleep. Alone in a crowd. Especially when you're the only one who showed up to the costume party dressed as a pineapple. Alpha and Omega. Which is just a fancy way of saying, the beginning and the end, but with fewer Greek letters. Alphabet soup. The only soup where you can spell out your name and have a meal at the same time. Alter ego. Because sometimes you just need a superhero persona to get through Monday mornings. Alter the course. Especially when your GPS insists on taking you through the scenic route, aka the traffic jam from hell. Alter the equation. But let's be honest, math was never your strong suit anyway. Alter the landscape. Or as I like to call it, rearranging the furniture and pretending you renovated the entire room. Alter the narrative. Because life is just one big choose-your-own-adventure book, and you're the author. Alter the status quo. Like switching up your morning routine and accidentally pouring orange juice in your cereal instead of milk. Alter the variables. Because sometimes life throws you a curveball and you just have to roll with it. Alter the way. Like taking the scenic route to work and pretending it's to avoid traffic, but really it's just for the Instagram-worthy views. Alter the world. One hilarious meme at a time. Alter the zeitgeist. Because who needs to follow trends when you can create your own? An arm and a leg, said the person looking at the price tag of avocado toast in a trendy cafe. An axe to grind. Or as lumberjacks call it, therapy. An eye for an eye. And a tooth for a toothpaste left open without the cap. An offer you can't refuse. Unless it's the last slice of pizza, then it's up for negotiation. An open book. Especially when it's a choose-your-own-ending novel and you keep flipping back and forth between chapters. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. Unless we're talking about chocolate cravings, in which case, prevention is futile. And another thing, said the person who just remembered the million other things they needed to complain about. And the rest is history. But if you ask your grandparents, they'll give you the extended director's cut with commentary. Angel in disguise. Usually disguised as your mom when she brings you chicken soup when you're sick. Ankle biter. AKA tiny humans with a knack for finding the most painful places to bite. Another day, another dollar. But also another day closer to retirement, right? Answer, said the person who confidently raised their hand in class and then promptly forgot everything they were going to say. Anything but. Like when you ask for directions and they give you anything but helpful advice. Anything goes. Except for pineapple on pizza. We can all agree that's just wrong. Anything you can do, I can do better. Except for parallel parking. Let's not even go there. Appearances can be deceiving. Especially when you accidentally swipe right on a photo of someone's dog instead of the person. Apple of one's eye. Until it's the last apple in the fruit bowl, then it's fair game for a snack. Apples and oranges. Because comparing them is like comparing, well, apples and oranges. Argue for your limitations, and sure enough, they're yours. Or as I like to call it, self-sabotage with a side of stubbornness. Arm and a leg. The currency used to purchase textbooks in college. Armed to the teeth, said the person who decided to bring a water gun to a squirt gun fight. As American as apple pie. Because nothing says America like dessert for breakfast. As clear as day, said the person who forgot their glasses and walked into a glass door. As dead as a doornail. And twice as useful when you're trying to hang a wreath. As easy as pie. Except for when it comes to making a pie crust from scratch. then it's as easy as solving a Rubik's Cube blindfolded. As fate would have it. And fate seems to have a twisted sense of humor most of the time. As good as gold. Especially when it's chocolate wrapped in gold foil. As happy as a clam. Until someone tries to open the clam shell, then it's a different story. As high as a kite. Especially when you accidentally drink 3 cups of coffee in a row. As luck would have it. And luck usually decides to take a vacation when you need it the most. As old as the hills. Said the person trying to justify their outdated fashion choices from the 90s. As plain as the nose on your face. Which is only plain until you discover contouring makeup tutorials on YouTube. As right as rain. Unless you're caught without an umbrella in a downpour, then it's more like as wet as a sponge. As the crow flies. But let's be honest, crows are terrible navigators. As thick as thieves. Like 2 peas in a pod, but with a tendency to get into trouble together. As time goes by. And as it goes by, it seems to speed up, especially on Friday afternoons. As 2 peas in a pod. Until one of the peas decides it wants to roll away and explore the kitchen floor. At a loss for words. Especially when trying to explain why you accidentally set the kitchen on fire while attempting to cook dinner. At a moment's notice. Which is usually when the printer decides to run out of ink right before you need to print an important document. At a snail's pace. Said the person stuck behind the slowest driver on the highway. At daggers drawn. Or as married couples call it, trying to agree on what to watch on Netflix. At death's door. Usually after eating questionable leftovers from the back of the fridge. At loggerheads. Like trying to decide between pizza or tacos for dinner and ending up in a heated debate. At 6s and 7s. Which is the result of trying to organize a family gathering with relatives who can't agree on anything. At the crack of dawn. Especially when you have to wake up early for a flight and question all your life choices. At the drop of a hat. Like when your friend says they're craving pizza and you're already on the phone ordering delivery. At the 11th hour. And suddenly you realize you forgot about that important deadline, so it's time for a last-minute panic. At the end of one's rope. Which is usually where you find yourself after a long week of dealing with Karens and their unreasonable demands. At the end of the day. And you're left wondering why you even bothered getting out of bed in the first place. At the top of one's game. But let's be honest, most of us are just trying to stay awake during Monday morning meetings. At wit's end. Which is conveniently located right next to the coffee machine in the office break room. Avoid like the plague. Usually where your mind goes during those endless meetings that could have been an email. Awkward as a cow on roller skates. Just imagine Bessie trying to navigate the roller rink. It's utterly ridiculous. As we wrap up our journey through the land of revamped sayings, remember to hit that like button if you've enjoyed the comedic twists and turns. Laughter is contagious, so why not spread the joy by sharing this video with your friends? And don't forget to subscribe for more hilarious content that's guaranteed to brighten your day. So, until next time, keep laughing, keep spreading the cheer, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more fun adventures ahead.